maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba.
At the height of the Cold War, there was a nuclear stalemate that was famously known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. 162 Russian missiles pointed directly at American cities, ready to level the country at the word go. The anxiety was at an all-time high. A lot of American families prepared for the worst. The US government even made films instructing families on how to build their own personal home bunker. It was a real everyday threat. A threat which was so intense that a man from a small town known as Plainview, Texas decided, if we're all going to live underground, we should do it right. And we need to show people that this is the future. This is a brief history of the underground world home from the New York World's Fair, and how it might still be there. Julian Harvey Swayze, or just Jay Swayze. He was formerly a military chemical weapons expert, but with the Cold War putting a little existential dread into the world, in 1962 he decided to make a small career shift into building fallout shelters. But not just your typical run-of-the-mill, let's sit in the corner of the basement for 35 years fallout shelters. No. The first fallout shelter he built for himself and his family, and he called it the Atomitat, which was a combination of the words atomic and habitat. What made it so different was that Swayze said he built it like a ship in a bottle. So pretty much, imagine you took your house and then you dug a giant house-sized hole, and then you put your house in the hole, covered the hole, and then went back to living in your house. That's it. That was the entire concept. If you're thinking that's a little weird, that's because you're right. It is. As you walked up to the house, on the surface, there was just a door with a garage on either side of it, and then a giant smokestack behind that in a mostly empty backyard. Once you opened the front door, there was just a dark, ominous staircase staring right back at you, and once you reached the bottom, there was the front of your house, complete with lights and windows, a planter box, and even a roof and siding. Like, that is weird. Like, when he meant a ship in a bottle, he really meant a ship in a bottle. And better yet, it had a back patio, mind you, still underground, and every room had a patented window system that had a light switch to turn on the simulated sun, scenic views painted on the wall behind, and a ventilation shaft that actually let in fresh air. Okay, as weird as it is, it seemed pretty cool too. It even had a built-in entertainment center with a record player and a radio inside the wall, along with speakers in every room, an intercom system, and a shuffleboard court. The pinnacle of luxury. Fortunately, Swayze's weird design actually found some good success. In the 2 years that him and his family spent living in it, 35,000 people came to visit it, which in a rural Texas town, way before the invention of the internet, that was impressive. And because of all the news coverage it got in this time period, a multi-millionaire named Gerard Henderson, who with a name like that made his fortune in the classic old man way of selling shares of a trucking company he created during the Depression and waiting, he found out about Swayze's design and told him that in return of 51% stake in what would be a newly formed corporation called Underground World Homes, he would lay out $1 million to build one of Swayze's homes as an exhibit at the upcoming 1964 World's Fair. As soon as Swayze heard that, done deal. And in October 1963, they broke ground on the soon-to-be model dystopian home of the future in Flushing Meadows Park, New York. Everything was going perfectly. On opening day of the fair, the exhibit opened with more promise and more luxury than Swayze's original home could have ever dreamed of having. In addition to everything that was in the original Texas home, the World's Fair home had double front doors, a vaulted ceiling, a grand piano, a backyard fountain and garden, a fireplace, chandeliers, and somewhere in the house there was apparently a pipe organ. Oh, and how could I forget? Shuffleboard. Over the course of the 1964 and 1965 season of the fair, 500,000 people ventured underground for the 12-minute tour/sales pitch of the home, which apparently was offered in 15 different languages. Along with that, fairgoers were given brochures with information about the home and the option to buy an album of the music that played throughout the tour, all by Johnny Mann, who apparently was the voice of Theodore from the Chipmunks. Makes sense. Anyways, so why is it that with all this draw, all this appeal, out of 500,000 people who toured the home, not a single sale of an underground home was made? Well, there's a few reasons. The spot that the home was built on for the fair, it was picked because the dirt in that spot was ideal for easing construction, which is great, that makes sense. The downside of that spot was that it was in the far back corner of the park where a lot of fairgoers wouldn't be willing to go. If you attended the fair, it made a lot more sense at the time to stay in the middle of the park to get the most out of your time at the fair. Even if a visitor did wind up traveling all the way to the area of the underground home, the next problem was that everything that made the exhibit so attractive, well, it was underground. It was hidden. The only thing there was to see from the surface was a couple of modern but really unremarkable glass boxes and a salad bar, which just made everything look like a gift shop or a place to stop and eat. It didn't look like an attraction. And even if you found excitement in all that, I mean, woo, who doesn't love salad? If you decided to actually go and ask for a tour, then it was an extra $1 to actually go down and take the tour on top of the $2 that you already paid to get into the fair. Like, if it were me, I'd be like, no, we're not going to pay an extra $1 to go into the fancy basement. I want to ride the giant tire. Okay, so maybe if that was fixed, more people would have seen the home. But even though it had all those problems, 500,000 people still went into the house. So again, why did no one buy? Just the construction of the house alone costs $820,000 in today's money. And by the time 1964 came around, the world had kind of backed away from nuclear war. Yes, America was still in the Cold War, but everyone's anxiety kind of cooled off compared to just a couple years ago during the Cuban Missile Crisis. In the end, nobody was willing to shell out what was 20 times the average yearly salary just to be constantly stuck in a giant basement. Once the fair was over, Jay Swayze's dream of selling underground homes to the masses was too. He went on to build only 2 other underground homes, one in the small town of Ward, Colorado, and one in Las Vegas, both of which were for his partner Gerard Henderson. The only other remaining artifact of Swayze's dream was a book he published on the subject in 1980, 1 year before his death, titled Underground Homes and Gardens, of which only a handful of copies exist. The 1964 attraction was such a major flop that when the fair was over, the Underground Home Corporation didn't even make enough money to cover the attraction itself, and therefore was left with no money to demolish it. And that's where the story gets interesting. The rumor is that during the demolition of the 1964 World's Fair, the underground home was emptied, the surface building was removed, but as for the main bunker, there wasn't enough money to pull it out of the ground, so it was just covered up. This rumor has been around since the fair closed 60 years ago. It was popular enough of a rumor that it spawned an episode of CSI in 2009 where a serial killer was living in the abandoned underground home and moving in and out of it through the sewers. Now the question is all this true? Is the underground home still underground? Well, the home could very well still be there. There's records in the New York Public Library of the demolition's completion, but Swayze could have very possibly, with him being trapped in the financial position he was in, covered the home and just checked the box that the demolition was complete and then submitted it. There has been a small group who have looked into excavating the site, but they were never really able to put together enough evidence to convince the New York City Parks Department that the benefit of digging would outweigh the disruption it would cause to the park. Logistically, getting permission to excavate on a site like that, in a public park in New York City, on just a hunch and an old rumor, that's a hard bargain. So unfortunately, we'll probably never really find out if the underground home is still there, but even though Swayze's concept was an initial flop, the idea behind it never fully faded away. There's Fallout, a game franchise that's been going strong for over 25 years, where the whole story has to do with people who live in a giant underground bunker community. And if you look at the prepper community, there's crazy modern luxury bunkers all over the world built for billionaires and doomsday preppers that have game rooms, rock climbing walls, shooting ranges, and all sorts of other crazy luxury things. But there is one thing that no modern bunker has, which Swayze definitely did right. Shuffleboard.
No, I'm trying to forget about how much I care for you.